Hello, I am Tammy Marshall. I'm the author of Trouble on Tybee and four other books so far. I've already shared on my YouTube channel the prologue and some introductory information about this particular novel, which is a suspense book. I've also read chapter one so far. So if you haven't had opportunity yet to view any of those videos, you might want to do that because today I'm going to be sharing chapters two and three of Trouble on Tybee. Chapter 2 The Calendar. Sometime later, the call of nature, along with an overwhelming thirst, pulled me away from the computer screen. I'd just finished reading the third short story of what seemingly Mother had intended to be part of an anthology of crime stories. It was odd, though, because she'd only ever published novel length mysteries and thrillers. Her few published short stories were simply excerpted teaser sections of her novels used to entice readers into buying her books. Why she had decided to create a book-length collection of stories was beyond me, and I wondered if that indeed had been her plan. As I stood filling a glass of water from the dispenser at the front of the refrigerator, I noticed how dim it was in the kitchen. I looked at the digital clock on the microwave and was shocked to find that I'd spent nearly 4 hours reading from Mother's computer screen. No wonder my neck was stiff and my vision was somewhat blurry. I gulped down the water and refilled the glass. Then I opened the refrigerator door and pulled out a few leftovers from the numerous frozen casseroles and other foodstuffs that had appeared once news of Mother's passing made the rounds of the neighborhood and beyond. I scooped some cold lasagna onto a plate and popped it into the microwave. A distant beeping caught my attention, and I laughed as I realized I'd left my cell phone above me in Mother's attic. While the lasagna revolved on its plate in the microwave, I headed back to the attic and located my phone lying next to the last box I'd been going through before Milton's phone call and subsequent task had sidetracked me from my sorting. As I reached for it, the screen lit up with a text message, and once I'd palmed my phone, I could see that I'd missed many texts and calls from my husband. This latest text read, "Really starting to worry." I pushed the call button and headed back down the narrow staircase. Randall answered on the first ring. "Stacy?" "Yes, it's me. I'm sorry. I left my phone in the attic and only now realized I didn't have it with me." I re entered the kitchen and took my steaming plate of lasagna out of the microwave. "Oh, ouch!" I exclaimed as I plopped the hot plate onto the counter. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. The plate is hot, that's all." I could hear his sigh over the phone. The question was it a sigh of relief that I was fine? A sigh of frustration at my ineptness? Or a sigh of weariness at having to deal with me? "When are you planning to be done down there?" Weariness, I decided. It was my turn to sigh quietly, though. "I've told you more than once that I don't know. There's a lot to go through here, and John's no help, as usual." "Yes, well, he does have a job and a family to attend to." "Ouch," I said, drawing the word out for emphasis. Another sigh on his end. "You know I didn't mean anything by that." I pulled a stool up to the counter and cut off a piece of my lasagna. I blew on it to cool it. Sounded that way. "I know. I miss you. The house is so empty without you." I chewed the pasta and made a face. It tasted rubbery, so I pushed the plate away. "You could come back down here and help me," I suggested, even though it was the last thing I wanted. Randall was Mr. Get Shit Done right now, and I didn't want anyone rushing me or urging me to get rid of things that I might not yet want to be rid of. Besides, I knew what his answer to my offer would be. "Sure enough," he said, "you know I don't have any more time off and that I can take right now. Plus, we're behind on the current project as it is." I propped my chin in my hand and studied the wall calendar next to the counter where I sat. Mother had always kept one hanging in her kitchen, many of the squares penciled in with names to indicate their birthdays. The current one displayed large, glossy photos of castles. I was certain that the well-known White Castle for the month of February was Germany. "That's odd," I muttered. "What's odd?" Randall asked, his voice loud in my ear. I pushed the speaker button and set my cell phone on the counter. Mother's wall calendar is still open till February. I scanned the few birthdays she'd recorded there and frowned when I didn't recognize any of the names. I lifted the page to peer at March, the current month. The calendar squares were blank, but the castle was one I recognized from a long ago student trip to Spain. That's not so odd, really. She died at the beginning of the month, so maybe she hadn't flipped the page yet. I let the calendar page fall and studied the names recorded in the day squares of February. I heard the snide tone in my voice as I said, I'm aware of when Mother died, Randall. What's odd is that she was always so meticulous about the date and about accomplishing a certain amount of writing every single day that it's unlike her not to have the calendar on the correct month. I paused and considered. There were a lot of people in and out of here after she died, I guess. One of them might have bumped it. As I held the lower leaf in my hand, my eyes fell upon the final date in the corner. What the hell? Now what? Randall's distant voice reached me from far away. He seemed to have put his own phone on speaker and had wandered off a pace or two. I yanked the calendar off the wall and looked at the cover. This calendar is from last year. Randall's voice came through much louder. Now that definitely is odd. I flipped through all the pages. They were blank. Only February's contained anything written in Mother's own hand. But as I again studied the names listed there, I was convinced that they were names of people I'd never met. I probably wouldn't even have noticed except that it's a leap year, so February should have 29 days in it. Randall made a chuckling noise, and then his voice came from afar again. Sylvia Morton, famous mystery writer, leaves a mystery behind for someone to solve. I was doubtful. My mother might have been a phenomenal mystery and thriller writer, but she was very meticulous about her routine and about certain things she used every day. There was no way she would have neglected to change her wall calendar month, let alone the entire calendar. I read the birthday names again. Do you know a Mason Glandow? I think that's what it says. Mother's handwriting has always been a bit iffy for me to decipher, and the ink she used is awfully light. It sounds vaguely familiar. Really? I was certain the names on this page were people I didn't know. I said it sounds a little familiar, but I know a lot of people. Might just be the name of someone here in Des Moines. Lots of people have the same names. True, you definitely know a lot of people. Well, construction has always been a booming business. Yes, I know. But you're also Mr. I can talk to anyone about anything. I'm more like Mother. I prefer my privacy. Let me read you a couple more names, I suggested, not wanting to hear the pity or the lecture that was certain to come from him if I didn't change the subject. All right. His voice was clearer, so the phone must have been back against his ear so he could hear me. Sandy Evans, Mitchell Conroy, Elsie Montgomery. Randall made a slight noise. Do you recognize them? Not exactly. But aren't those characters from her first books? I scanned the names again. That's very odd. Why would she list those names on this calendar page and then hang it on her wall? I have no idea. Maybe it's a sign you should finally read her books. He chuckled, but his laugh sounded forced to me. I hung the calendar back on the wall. Actually, I was reading some of her stuff before I called you. You were? Yes, I told him about Milton's call and the discovery of several unpublished stories on Mother's computer. So I now have more to do than just sort through her stuff. I'm going to have to stay a lot longer. He was silent for a moment before he said, Take as long as you need, but promise you'll come back. We can fix what happened, but we need to do it together. I stared at the picture of the German castle until it blurred before my eyes. Then I softly said, All right, Randall, I'll call you tomorrow. I love you, Stacy. His voice floated across the miles to me, and I knew he was waiting for my reply, but I remained quiet until the connection went dead. Then I plugged my phone in so it could recharge, walked into Mother's library, and scanned her shelves for copies of her books. I had some long overdue catching up to do. Chapter 3. The Novel. Hours later, I closed Mother's first novel, Danger Zone, a short yet gripping page-turner that spent a few weeks on the bestseller list, catapulting her career, as well as Milton's, into a successful one. I could see why. I'd managed to finish it in one sitting, so thriller junkies must have loved it. I rubbed my eyes and blinked, attempting to gain a focus on the more distant items in Mother's library office. Before sitting down to read, I'd switched on all three floor lamps, but the hallway and the rest of the house beyond the doorway were dark and silent. I shook my head at my own stupidity of reading a book like Danger Zone so late in the evening. I was certain to have difficulty falling asleep after reading about the grisly murder of Sandy Evans, an Air Force pilot who'd gotten mixed up with the wrong sort of man, not knowing her lover was a killer. I sat pondering and wondering how my mother, the woman who never used cuss words, could so flawlessly pepper her characters' dialogue with every conceivable combination involving the F word. How could the unassuming woman who tucked me into bed each night and who'd attended each of my failed piano recitals be the same crafty woman who could create the evil character she'd named Carl Green, a fellow pilot turned stalker whose quest to possess Sandy turned violent in the skies over Colorado? Carl sabotaged Sandy's plane and followed her in a Cessna he'd borrowed from a hangar at the small airport where he worked. As Sandy attempted to ascend over a mountain, her plane began descending instead and eventually plowed into the side of a rock face. But Carl saw her manage to eject safely from the doomed aircraft before its impact. Thus, he began a deadly pursuit of her through the rugged Rocky Mountains, all while making it appear that he was part of the search and rescue operation. Before he killed her, though, Sandy managed to wound Carl with a large rock, crushing his left cheekbone with her last bit of strength before he strangled her to death and buried her body in the soft earth near a stream. The search and rescue operation was finally abandoned, and Carl explained away his injury by saying he fell and hit his head on a rock during the search. The Air Force, however, began an extensive investigation into the plane crash, and as rumors of foul play began circulating, Carl left town. The novel ended with Carl accepting a ride from a semi driver who was on his way to Utah, and with Carl hoping to make a fresh start and leave his evil ways behind. I shook my head as I crossed the dark hall to the bathroom. I flicked on the light and stared at my haggard reflection. I was long overdue for a decent haircut, and there were very pronounced bags under my eyes. Look what your death and your horrible story about Carl Green have done to me, Mother. I look like shit. For a moment I instinctively cocked an ear, waiting to hear Mother admonish me for swearing in her house. But then I called out, "That's right, Mother. I said shit. Now I'm going to say damn too. Let's throw in a fuck for good measure. Lord knows you used those words enough in that book I just read. And you have many more novels in there that are probably crammed with profanity as well. What the hell, Mother? You never spoke those words aloud, ever. Were you saving them up for your stories?" Finally, I tossed my hands up in frustration with myself. What did I expect? I had had ample time to read Mother's books long before her death. If I'd taken a genuine interest in what she wrote while she was alive, I wouldn't now be so surprised that there was a side of my mother I never knew. It was my own fault, and now it was too late to connect with the side of Mother that I never knew existed. To cool off, I turned on the faucet and splashed some cold water across my face. Then I grabbed a small towel and dried my cheeks as I regarded my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Ah, geez, Mother, where did you come up with that story? You know it's going to keep me awake all night, right? Out of habit, I closed the bathroom door so I could pee, and then I chuckled at my foolishness because I was utterly alone in the house. No one was going to walk in on me. I almost cracked the door open, but one of the more heart pounding scenes in Danger Zone suddenly flooded my mind. Instead of cracking the door open, I firmly shut it and then I locked it for good measure. So those are chapters 2 and 3 of Trouble on Tybee. I hope you'll consider, looking into it, maybe buying a copy for yourself so you can read the rest of it. You can see it's quite lengthy. I'll be back another time with another chapter. Thanks for joining me.